Man, I was trying feverishly to get this podcast off before the clock strike 12 on the East Coast. Barely made it. This was a struggle. These playoff games are kicking my ass. And I wanted this series over so bad so I could just have the freedom to not be like the bondage of having to watch these games because I'm too involved, right, in playoff basketball. You guys know how much I enjoy playoff basketball. So it's not like regular season basketball where I could just not watch. I have to watch. It's like NFL, right? And if any NFL game is on, even if I'm not really interested in the two, I'm going to watch because it's like a drug. I've already told you that. So playoff basketball is like that for me. I have to watch, especially when it's compelling basketball. You get down to the final four teams, and these games are killing me because they go off so late. Anyway, we're going to talk about the two series, and now we're down to one series in terms of the conference finals. And I think the Mavericks just effed up. We'll talk about that and a lot to discuss. NFC West draft grades, and we'll rank the teams in the division and where I felt like their drafts fell between the four teams there. Interesting fact that you may not have known about the 18-game schedule. It's coming. We'll talk about all those things and more here on the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be? But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 421st installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Lot to discuss on today's program. I hope Memorial Day weekend was whatever you wanted it to be for you, whether it's a day of remembrance, a day of relaxation, a day to cook out, whatever it was for you. I hope you enjoyed that to the fullest. I'm refreshed. I feel good. Kind of felt like somewhat gluttonous over the weekend. I ate probably a little bit more, drank probably a little bit more than I needed to. I didn't feel like I worked as much as I should have. Thought there was a little bit more work out there for me to get after. But, sometimes you got to take a little bit of time for yourself. And, my wife is trying to convince me to do that a little bit more. I'm all about it. But, there are other factors that, are outside factors that, drive me to do the things that I do. So hopefully, you'll get to a point one day where those things don't matter as much and you're able to kind of relax a little bit more. But I had a chance, speaking of relaxing, to watch the X-Men 97 series. I cleaned it up. Yeah. My wife kept asking me, what are you waiting on? Like, because I would turn on an episode and then I would turn it off. I would watch an episode or two and then I would turn it off. And she's like, why are you not liking it? I'm like, I like it. Just relax. I'm going to watch it when I'm ready to watch it. Like, I'm going to binge it, and I know I'm going to binge it. And I want to be in a position where I can just watch it and enjoy it for what it is. And that point came this weekend. And boy, did it ever. We'll talk about that tomorrow, though. I got a whole bonus pod tomorrow where we'll dedicate that time to nothing but X-Men 97. I had a chance to watch some boxing last weekend. We never got to that. We probably won't get to it now. And so many things have happened and so much time has elapsed since I watched some boxing a couple of weekends ago. So probably not going to get to that, but NBA playoffs are in full swing. They're almost over now, as a matter of fact. We've been talking about them throughout these podcast episodes. Celtics did exactly what they were supposed to do to the Indiana Pacers, swept them. That's what I wanted to see them do to Cleveland the series before. This was impressive because they should have lost game one. I think everybody acknowledges that Indiana threw away an opportunity to actually make that a series. Had they won game one, we're not sitting here talking about a sweep, obviously, but we're talking about a totally different series, even without Tyrese Halliburton getting injured, or even without him in the lineup and him getting injured. They still would have been in this series, and who knows what would have happened had they beaten Boston in game one. But I think Boston's still in game one, and I say that in all seriousness, even though they were the home team, the favorite, all of that good stuff, them stealing game one because they should have lost gave them all the confidence in the world to do what they ultimately did, which was go on to win 4 straight and sweep the Indiana Pacers. And this a great thing for Boston. It puts them in a position where they don't even have to think about trying to rush back Kristaps Porzingis. I don't think they were going to do it anyway, but had they gotten into a 6-7 game tussle with the Pacers, they may have tried to rush him back, sort of like the Knicks had to do with OG Anunoby, knowing good and well he wasn't ready to play. The threat of your season being over forces you to do things that you would not normally do, i.e. Maxi Kleber playing tonight, not necessarily their season being on the line, but the injury to Derek Lively kind of pushed them towards, throwing Kleber out there. Had Lively not been injured, and I would honestly believe if this is not a 3-0 series with them having a chance to close it out at home, I don't think he plays. If this is a 2-1 series and they're up 2-1 in the series, I don't know if Maxi Kleber plays. And that might sound foolish because you don't want to be tied going back to, Minnesota 2-2, but you didn't want to go back to Minnesota at all, right? We'll come back to Boston quickly. Matter of fact, let's clean up Boston before we move on so we don't have to come back. I thought it was an excellent series for Jaylen Brown, especially, who won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, which is that a new thing? When did they start doing that? When did I miss that? Is that like, it can't be any more than 2 or 3 years old. Can't be. They had to just start giving out that trophy no more than 2-3 years ago. Have I missed it though? I probably, because I don't watch anything. Once the game's over, the minute the game's over, I turn off the TV. So probably missed them giving out that trophy the last 2 years or so, whatever the case may be. He deserved it. He was outstanding. And I thought different guys stepped up in different games. Horford in game 3 with the 7 threes. Brown, obviously, in game 1. They don't win game 1 without Jaylen Brown's heroics late in that game. And then Tatum took over in overtime. Game 2, it was just an all-around beatdown. I think there was an emotional letdown by the Pacers. You lose that kind of game in game 1. They fought their asses off for the first 3 quarters, but the game kind of got away from them. The game 3 was there for the taking. Andrew Nembhard went off in game 3 without Tyrese Halliburton, and it just was all for naught because they couldn't get the stops down the stretch and they couldn't make shots down the stretch. And they weren't able to win game 3. And once they didn't win game 3, you kind of knew the end was near. Were they going to fight? Were they going to send this thing back to Boston? Were they going to have some pride and not let the Celtics end them on their own floor? Or were they going to allow the brooms to come out? And unfortunately, they didn't have enough to get it done. And so the Celtics sweep them, and now they await the winner of this series. And the longer this series plays on, advantage Boston, even though I've always been a proponent of the team that has just played, right? You want to keep playing. You want to be in the swing of things. But, rest this time of the year is invaluable. I'd rather be rusty to start game 1 than to be banged up and injured. Like he's banged up, man. Like he could use a week off, which is what would have happened had they won tonight. Now they have to travel to Minnesota. And even if they win game 5, it's a week between the start of the finals and game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. But now you got to travel back to Dallas. And so you lose a day. And so it's not as much time as they would have had they won. They would have had over a week. Now Lively doesn't have to worry about coming back sooner than he should from a neck strain. Kleber has the time he needs to continue to rest that shoulder and get back into the swing of things. And Kyrie, who's older, and Luka, who needs the rest because his ankle and his knee. all of these things would have come to fruition, and now you have to keep playing. And not only do you have to keep playing, meanwhile, the Celtics get to rest all of their guys, and they give, most importantly, the opportunity for Kristaps Porzingis to rest without having to try to rush back because of a pivotal game 6 or a must-win game 7. Now they can just let him rest. And even if he's not ready at the start of that series, the time off, which they would have had anyway, that series wasn't going to start till June 6th, no matter what happened in either one of the two series. But now there's no urgency, right? There's no sense of urgency because they're not in a position where they can be, have their season ended. Their season is very much alive, and they're the favorites to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Meanwhile, I thought the Mavs rather had the exact same opportunity to do what the Celtics did just a day ago, and they blew it. And we talk about the NBA being a make or miss league. Literally, that's what it came down to. The Mavericks, big two of Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, just couldn't make shots. That's what it really boiled down to. It got to the point where Kyrie got gun shy because he wasn't shooting it so well, right? He started passing up opportunities to shoot the ball. Now, he made some good decisions with passes and things of that nature, but then he made a terrible pass at the end of the game when they were down 5 and still had a shot, and he turned it over, and that was pretty much all she wrote at that point. Meanwhile, on the other side, Cat, who I continue to harp on his low basketball IQ. You saw it on full display tonight with the stupid fouls. In a game where you could have your season ended, he's not on the floor for you in the final 3 minutes of the game because he fouled out, and he was your best player in the fourth quarter. You could argue the entire second half he was their best player, but he spent much of the second half on the bench because of foul trouble, which is the paradox with him because he's going to do stupid shit because, again, he doesn't have high basketball IQ. But when he's making shots, he's tough to deal with. And he got hot, piping hot in that fourth quarter. And ultimately, that personal 8-0 run or so when he knocked down the 2 threes and he also had another bucket in there, I thought it was that stretch there that gave them this victory, that put them in a position in the driver's seat to win this game, because I don't know if Anthony Edwards was going to be able to do it by himself. As a matter of fact, I know he wasn't going to be able to do it by himself. And despite Anthony Edwards and Cat outplaying Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, the Mavericks were right in this game. And they clearly missed Derek Lively in this game because Kleber, while he did give them some quality minutes, he was incapable of really giving them anything offensively. You can tell he's hesitant to shoot. It's not comfortable for him. They talked about it during the game, and you could see it. He does not want to shoot, so you can play off of him at the three-point line, not like you would normally play him where you have to be up on him because he can shoot the three. He's no longer a threat. And so if you don't have to guard him, you don't have to extend your defense out to the three-point line when Maxi Kleber's in the game. It allows that guy who's guarding him, which is usually a big, to then roam and have the ability to alter shots and be disruptive as a defender. So advantage, Timberwolves when he's on the floor to me. And Gafford was good tonight, but they were missing Lively. They were definitely missing Lively, but ultimately they were missing shots. And that's where it all kind of, what it all boiled down to is they got enough production from the others. While PJ Washington didn't shoot it great, he made enough shots. He scored enough points. You got a great boost from Jaden Hardy in this game. He knocked down 3 threes, and I think he was in double figures. Jones Jr., Derrick Jones Jr. was really good. He was knocking down the 3 tonight. So you got contributions from the other guys, and they had to step up because Kyrie was awful from a scoring standpoint tonight. And, Luka wasn't knocking down shots, even though he ended up probably close to 30 points. He still wasn't knocking down shots. So you needed those other guys to step up, and they did, and unfortunately, you needed your closers, right? That's what this series has come down to, is the closers. Kyrie and Luka have made shots, have made those critical plays, have found the right open teammates, but they've really hunted their shots late in games and knocked them down, and that was the difference. To this point, they made more winning plays down the stretch. They've been trailing in every single one of these Western Conference final games in the final 5 minutes. Really, you probably could go to the final 3 or 4 minutes of the game. The Mavericks have been down, and they've found ways to come back and win because they've gone on that 7-1 spurt, that 9-2 spurt late to finish out the game and ultimately win it. They didn't do it tonight. It was the Timberwolves who went on that little spurt late, keyed by Cat, and then finished up by Anthony Edwards. I think up until the Conley free throw, Edwards and Cat had combined for the last 13 points in the game for the Timberwolves, which keyed that stretch where they kind of took the lead and then really put their their hands around the necks of this game and really choked the life out of the Mavs in game 4 and that ability to sweep. And here's the problem with losing this game if you're Dallas. Now all the pressure's on you. Because, and I know that might sound crazy to some of you, here's why that was a big loss, and I'll explain. The Timberwolves came out in this game, and you could see it from the jump. They came out playing loose. We got nothing to lose. Like, we're down 0-3. No team's ever come back from an 0-3 deficit. I mean, what do we got to lose, man? Let's just go out here, lay it all out on the line, and if we come up short, everybody expected us to do that anyway. We win this game, great. We go back home, we survive for another game, and let's just see what happens. Like, that's going to be the mentality, is let's just see what happens. Let's just go out here, play our best brand of basketball, leave it all out on the floor, and let's just see what happens, right? They've been in every single game. It's not like Dallas has dominated them, and it's a sure thing that they're going to win one more game. They could have easily been down 0-3 in this series, could the Mavericks. They just happened to make more plays down the stretch, and you'd like to think, and I think most of us believe, that they're going to do that again one more time and win the series at some point. But what you've effectively done, especially with Derek Lively's neck, and you don't want to rush him because he's such a big part, and he'll probably be able to go in game 5. But again, you didn't want to put him in a position where he had to do that. You saw him on the bench over there, kind of working his neck around. He's still obviously in pain, and he's not going to be 100% or even, I'd say 75%, but he'll probably give it a go in game 5 because they want to close this thing out. They don't want this series to prolong. And here's why the Mavericks now have all the pressure on themselves, because now Minnesota has effectively put themselves in a position where they go back home. If they can win game 5, now you have to win game 6, because normally in these situations, when you're down 3-0 in a series, you're the team that started out. You're the team at home with home court advantage. And so if it somehow magically gets to game 7, you're on your home floor. It's in the reverse this time around, where if this thing gets to game 5, which it has, and Minnesota wins, now there will be an enormous amount of pressure on Dallas to win game 6, because you don't want to go back to Minnesota for game 7, right? And then you don't want to be the team to be the first, because somebody's going to be the first to blow a 3-0 lead. You don't want to be that team. And so the pressure mounts with every single game that you don't win. Every single game that Minnesota prolongs this series, you start to have doubt creep into your mind. The pressure starts to mount. People start talking about what if. You start to get tighter. And more importantly, I'm not worried about Luka and Kyrie. They're not the ones that are going to get extremely tight and start missing shots. It's the other guys. It's the Jaden Hardys. It's the PJ Washingtons. It's the Derrick Jones Jr. that I worry about missing shots that are open looks. It's the Josh Greens, who also knocked down a couple of shots tonight. They wasted a good game from the other guys because the two stars didn't play well enough. And now all of a sudden, you could see a situation where your two stars can carry you, but if you don't get contributing games from those other guys, and they're going to be the ones that get tight. They're going to be the ones that clinch up in those moments where they're open in the corner and they got a chance to make a big shot. Those are the guys you worry about as you go to game 5 and potentially 6, and God forbid you get to a game 7, right? Now all the momentum's on the side of Minnesota. And what the Timberwolves have shown us, if you haven't been paying attention, they've shown the ability to stare adversity in the face and come out on top. They went from up 2-0 against the Denver Nuggets to down 3-2, and they went on the road in game 7, and they were down 22 points and came back and won that game. If you think this team is afraid of being down 0-3, you got another thing coming. After the game 3 loss, Anthony Edwards, which is what he's supposed to say, but he's one of those dudes that actually believes the shit that he says out of his mouth, right? He's not just talking just to talk. He said, hey, we about to go make history, bro. Like, he believes that. And winning this game gives him more confidence to feel like that's what's about to happen. And so you don't want their confidence swelling. You don't want guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who knocked down a couple of shots. You don't want him to start getting hot, right? All of a sudden, he gains a little. The longer this series goes on, those guys that have struggled to shoot the basketball start to gain confidence. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker was one of those guys, right? Or Walker Alexander, excuse me, is one of those guys that has struggled all series long. Can't find the basket. He knocked down a couple of threes in this game. He could go back to Minnesota and go nuclear and knock down 5 or 6 of them, and all of a sudden you're back in Dallas, 3-2 series, must-win game. All the pressure's on you if you're Dallas. You lose this game, you got to go back to Minnesota. They've won 3 in a row. I've been there as a fan. I thought my Portland Trail Blazers, I want to say it was 2001 or 2. We were down 3-0 to the Mavericks, 0-3. And we won 3 in a row, and we got it to game 7. And I thought we were going to go to Dallas and win. And we just ran out of gas, came up short. But you could feel it. You could feel the tide changing. You could feel like the pressure mounting on Dallas in that series. It's funny that was against Dallas, and this could potentially be against Dallas too. Now, again, they got Kyrie Irving and they got Luka Doncic. I don't see those two allowing this thing to get out of control and them not being able to wrangle this thing in before it gets to a point of no return. I could see them closing them out in 5. The problem is, normally in these situations, game 5 is at home, right? Normally when you're up 3-0, you didn't close it out, like similar to what we just saw from Boston. The team that's up 3-0 is usually the team with home court advantage. So you don't close it out on the other team's home floor. You just go back home in game 5 and take care of business. It's different because the Mavericks were the lower seeded team. They had a chance to close it out on their home floor and they didn't take advantage. Now you got to go on the road, which they're fully capable of, which they showed us in the first 2 series of the playoffs. They're more than capable of going on the road. They have no issues going on the road and closing them out in game 5. The problem is the Timberwolves are going to come out. They're going to get extra energy from their crowd. And like we've seen all series long, the Timberwolves have led deep into the 4th quarter and had leads in every single one of the first 4 games with under 5 minutes to go and just couldn't close it. If they go home, guys that haven't been knocking down shots start knocking down shots. They get contributions from those other guys. Anthony Edwards feeds off the crowd's energy, and all of a sudden there's this avalanche. Now it's 3-2, and you got to win game 6. And again, the longer this thing plays out, the more pressure starts to mount on the Dallas Mavericks. This was a golden opportunity wasted. If you're the Mavericks, I still like them to finish this series out. I think they could go on the road and win game 5, but My money's on 6 now. I think they done effed it up to the point where they're not gonna win game 5, and they're probably gonna have to win it in 6. And I see them taking care of it in 6 back at home. Uh, if I were them, I probably would not play Derek Lively in 5. If he feels good enough to go, he's young. You know, the young body recuperates a lot faster than the old aging body. If he's able to go, then they're going to throw him out there. And he's such a difference maker. But if you could just give him one more game, I think he'd be really, really back to his normal self and super effective and be the Derek Lively you need him to be. And you get him back at home doing that. I would, if I could hold off one more game, I think I would. But you know how these things go. They're going to be antsy. They don't want to extend this out another game, and him not being out there is so, pivotal because, again, Kleber gives you nothing on offense. He's not rebounding, offensive rebounding. He's not going to roll to the rim. He's not, going to catch an alley. He's not finishing around the rim. He's not altering shots defensively. He doesn't really do anything other than offer you a bigger body out there because there's no Lively. So if he's not shooting the basketball and he's not as aggressive on the boards, then Maxi Kleber really doesn't offer you a ton of value. So missed opportunity for the Mavericks. Big win for Minnesota, and all of a sudden now, we all, the old adage, series doesn't start until one team wins on the other team's home floor. We saw Dallas do that in games 1 and 2, but you thought this series was over. It's not. I'm just telling you, this Timberwolves team very capable of making this thing very interesting, and I think they will. I think this is going 6 now. Mavericks had a chance to close this thing out and sweep just like Boston did and get the same amount of time off, essentially. Now they got to work for it, and I think it's going to take them until game 6 to get it done now. They really just effed up, if you ask me. But I digress. We'll see what happens. That's a missed opportunity if you're the Dallas Mavericks, and they know it. Nobody has to tell them they missed a golden opportunity. They know what they just did, and now they know they got to try to go make it right in game 5, and it's going to be a lot tougher because now you have to go on the road to do so. Let's get to the gym dropping session, shall we? I think we shall. Let me drop this gym on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T-double-E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So we're going to talk NFC West. The runner-up in the Super Bowl came from the NFC West. So we travel to that division next as we talk about the 2024 NFL draft for that division. And let's dive into that division. And I'm going to give you the teams in that division, their drafts, go over them quickly, and what I felt like the grade was. And obviously, I go in the order in which I think these drafts are ranked from least to best. So with that said, we start with the team that I thought had the least impressive draft. And I use that very loosely because I think this division had a very strong draft overall. You could argue that this was one of the better drafting divisions in the 2024 NFL draft. I just think overall, because of the wide range of ages and how many players played 5 and 6 years of college ball, there are not going to be a lot of teams with poor drafts unless you just went out of your way to try to be special. None of these teams did any of that. They came away with good football players that fit their profile. Sans for Seattle, because it's a little different now with no Pete Carroll, but even I thought they had a really good draft. The 49ers, to me, had the worst draft. Again, I use that term loosely, of any of the teams in the NFC West. And, they're in a great position because They don't need a whole heck of a lot. And again, this is a team that the last 4 out of 5 years has found their way to the NFC Championship game and has been in the Super Bowl 2 times in those 5 years. So they are the gold standard in the NFC right now. There was so much talk, and there still is a little bit of talk about Brandon Ayuk and them wanting to get a deal done with him. So the Ricky Pearsall pick to start off their draft at the end of the first round had raised a lot of eyebrows, right? Including mine, because I'm like, he does a lot of those things. A lot of people say, this means the end of Deebo Samuel. I beg to differ. And I know a lot of people tried to compare Ricky Pearsall to Deebo Samuel. They are not the same player, not even remotely close to the same player. He's closer to Brandon Ayuk than he is Deebo Samuel. Deebo's a very rare specimen in the NFL. So I look at Pearsall, and he can do a lot of the same things Brandon Ayuk can. I think Ayuk offers you a little bit more in the 50-50 ball department down the field. But Pearsall is a guy that, for Shanahan's offense, he's going to be able to get open. He's going to be able to find the soft spots. He's going to be able to run that dig route, that drift route over the middle of the football field. He's fearless. He'll go over the middle of the field. We know he can run, even though you don't always see that separation. Kind of feel the same way about Brandon Ayuk, right? You don't usually see that definitive separation down the field, which is why you don't see the 49ers use him on a lot of deep routes unless it's like heavy play action fake. And then you see him on a deep over route or something like that, or a deep post. But for the most part, Pearsall is a great fit. And that's, to me, the key in the NFL is finding guys that fit, finding the personnel that fits your scheme. Ricky Pearsall fits Kyle Shanahan's offense. And I love that pick. He was one of my favorite receivers, as you guys know, in the draft. So I think it's a really good pairing there. Second round, Renardo Green, the cornerback out of Florida State. A lot of people asked me how I felt about Renardo Green. And I told a lot of people, I'm not that high on Renardo Green. Now, if you watch the first, and I've watched this game 80 million times because my team, the Washington Commanders, were hunting after a quarterback. So, of course, I watched Jaden Daniels against Florida State's defense, and then Florida State had a bunch of defenders get drafted. So, of course, you're going to watch the LSU tape. And vice versa, right? Malik Neighbors is playing against Renardo Green. So if you're watching those two guys, those two guys are going to get drafted and relatively high, I may add. You want to see what they did against one another. And his tape against those two receivers, Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, was outstanding. And so if you watch that game, you're like, yo, this guy is a first-round talent potentially. But, I look at his entire body of work. I look at his size. I wasn't sure about his speed. He did not do anything at the combine to quell my fears. Even though 4.49 is not slow, if you're not a bigger corner with longer limbs, 4.49 is okay, right? But, I mean, it looks better. I liken it to an item being $32.97 or $39.97. It looks better than $40. Right, to your eye, and that's why they do that, because to the consumer, it's not that much. You see 40 and now you get a little bit nervous. It's not that different from a 4.5. And if he was running a 4.51, we would have been like, oh man, he ran a 4.49, cool, right? My biggest issue with him is he's one of those down the field face guarders. I actually like his quickness. I think he's one of those guys that plays with elite level toughness. He's not afraid, despite his diminutive size. He's not the biggest guy in the world. I think he's like 5'10", 5'11", $185. He's not a big guy, but that doesn't deter him from getting in there and mixing it up. I think he's got really good short area quickness and the ability to click and close and do all of those things that you love to see in a corner. I think as you get further away from the line of scrimmage and further down the field is where he gets more and more into trouble, where I worry about him, because he's a down the field face guarder. type of guy that doesn't really look back to locate the ball. Now you'll see plays where he's facing the receiver. I can't stand this type of coverage where you're playing the receiver, you're facing him, ball is in the air, and then he'll look back last second, and then he'll swat the ball away with his inside arm, which is weird. I just hate that kind of coverage. I'd much rather my DB turn his back to the receiver, put himself in a position where he can actually take the ball away. He doesn't do that, which is why he only has one career interception in like 70 years in college football. You know, I have an issue with that. He has a lot of pass interference penalties down the field because he's very handsy. And again, he's face guarding the receiver instead of turning and locating the football. So I had a lot of issues with Renardo Green. If he's coached properly and you put him in, really good positions, he can end up being a really good corner in this league. He's got the tools. He's got all the things you're looking for outside of probably the elite size and speed. But again, he's got more than enough speed, more than enough, size, especially to play outside, which I think the 49ers are going to give him an opportunity to do that first. He's got the right temperament. He's got the quickness and the agility and all those things. I just don't love his technique. Can you refine that? Can you change that? Can you have him play a different style down the field? We'll see. But for where they got him, I don't have an issue with it. I don't necessarily love the player, right? So that pick didn't move me, but I didn't hate the pick because of where they got him. You essentially spent a third-round pick on him. That's where I would have taken him. So second round, final pick of the second round, solid value. Dominic Pooney, guard out of Kansas in the third round. Another solid selection. I actually liked him a lot, and I thought he was a third-round guard, so this is right around where I thought he'd come off the board. A guy that can play tackle and guard, but he's really, I think, a guard at the next level. And so I honestly think he is a guy that could start week 1 for the San Francisco 49ers. So I like this pick a lot. I mean, there's not really much more for me to add. A guy that he's got some issues sometimes with anchoring down. I think he's a better athlete and he's a better pass protector right now than he is a run blocker. But that's the essence of Kyle Shanahan's offenses. They prefer athletes over maulers because their style of running a football doesn't necessarily ask their offensive lineman to take a guy one-on-one, mano-a-mano, and put his dick in the dirt. It's really just asking them, beat this guy to the spot, cut him off, and get in his way. And our backs will do the rest. Dominic Pooney can do that. And I think he's a much better pass protector than he is a run blocker. But in their offense, if that's your deficiency, they can hide that if you're an athletic enough offensive lineman, and Dominic Pooney is definitely that. So like that pick there as well. Malik Mustafa in the 4th round out of Wake Forest at the safety position. Just a big ball of energy, man. I mean, this dude is probably about 5'11", 6 feet, 205 or something like that. And he just flies around. Like at the line of scrimmage, in the secondary, he'll come up and he'll hit you. He's just super aggressive. He reminds me a lot of the safety that the 49ers have, Talanoa Hufanga. He reminds me a lot of Talanoa Hufanga in the regard of Talanoa Hufanga just flies around like his hair's on fire, right? Just running around like a madman, and sometimes he can be over aggressive and can get him into trouble. But when you fly around like that and you find yourself around the ball, good things happen. And we saw that a couple of years ago when Talanoa Hufanga was just making all kinds of crazy plays, pick sixes, scooping up fumbles, all kinds of shit. And I see a lot of that in Malik Mustafa. It's almost like they said, let's get us another one of those type of players so that if Hufanga is never the same again after that injury, we got us a guy. I think that's a really good pick there in the 4th round. And he can do a little bit of everything. Play a little coverage, come down, be a physical enforcer down around the line of scrimmage, can be a blitzer. He can do a little bit of everything. Malik Mustafa. One of my favorite 49er picks is Isaac Guerendo in the 4th round out of Louisville. I talked about him being the perfect one cut and go type of running back. He is, you know what he could remind me of like this year? He could remind me of this year's Isaiah Pacheco, because a lot of people didn't know about Pacheco coming out of Rutgers as a 7th round pick, but he was fast as all get out. What did Isaiah Pacheco run? A 4.3 something? Isaac Guerendo ran a 4.33. Obviously, you watch his tape, you don't get to see a lot of it because they used him in between the tackles a ton, and he showed physicality, which we know Isaiah Pacheco has, and Guerendo kind of has that, high knee physical running style similar to Isaiah Pacheco. You just don't see guys running like that anymore. And so I just think he's going to be a great compliment to Christian McCaffrey. And, the thing about the 49ers at the running back position for so long, specifically with whomever their lead back was, whether it was Mostert, going back a little ways, Tevin Coleman or Jerick McKinnon, it didn't really matter. When you subbed out the back, whomever that starter was, Mostert more recently, when they had Matt Breida, they still had another guy that could run. But generally speaking, over the last 3 or 4 years here, when they've subbed out that back, they lost an incredible amount of speed. That next guy that they bring in, while very effective, doesn't possess that home run hitting speed. And so that threat of, hey, we got to stay gap disciplined, this guy could hurt us, it kind of goes out the window. Now with Isaac Guerendo, that threat returns. If they take McCaffrey out of the game and they bring in Isaac Guerendo, look out. He's 10 times faster than Christian McCaffrey. Now, he may not have the vision, he may not have the agility and the ability to cut it back on a dime and make somebody miss, and the body control and the balance and all of that good stuff that McCaffrey has that makes him such an elite back. But if he hits a seam, God bless and good night. So that one cut and go system, I think, is a dream for a guy like Isaac Guerendo, and it's a fantastic. But Kyle knows what he's looking for in the back, which is why I'm like, this was too easy for him, man. Y'all teed this up, y'all threw the man an alley, and you expected him not to dunk it? Yeah, right. Same with Jacob Cowan in the 4th round. I thought they really just crushed it in the 4th round, to be honest with you. If we're being honest, outside of, and even the Renardo Green pick is a good pick, but I just thought they crushed it in day 2 overall. I mean, rounds 2 through 4, because day 2 is 2 and 3. But this 4th round, crazy. To get Mustafa, Guerendo, and now Jacob Cowan, receiver out of Arizona. And somebody had brought up a really good point. I forgot who said it. It might have been Daniel Jeremiah. It could have been great. It could have been Zerline. It was one of those dudes. Somebody brought up the point that I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who brought up the point that they thought the 49ers were going to be in on Xavier Worthy, and maybe that's why Kansas City felt the need to trade up with Buffalo to get Xavier Worthy, because they might have thought a team like San Francisco was going to try and draft him, because obviously the Texans and the 49ers run the same offense, because Bobby Slowick came from San Francisco, and pretty much everything he knows about offense and defense he got from the Shanahans. He's been studying under them for the last 6-7 years, going all the way back to when he was in Washington. So, Bobby Slowick's entire offensive DNA comes from the Shanahans. So, in essence, they're running the same offense. He may call different plays and sequence them differently, but it's the same offense. And having a guy like Tank Dell have the type of impact he had in his rookie season, you just expected the 49ers to try to go out and get a guy like that. And so word on the street was they wanted Xavier Worthy, which is why Kansas City traded up. But they get a Jacob Cowing, who is a Xavier Worthy, Tank Dell type of player here in the 4th round. And I think a lot of people slept on Jacob Cowing throughout this process. I watched so much Pac-12 football this year because of the pass rushers and the offensive linemen. Like, you could argue that the pass rushers, there's no argument to me. The best pass rushers came out of the Pac-12 this year. So I watched a lot of Pac-12 football, and in doing that, I ran into Jacob Cowing, especially, my team was, heavy on needing offensive line help, and they had a tackle by the name of Jordan Morgan that played there. So I watched a ton of Arizona football, and Jacob Cowing just kept jumping off the screen, Like, damn, he keeps making plays. And he's a smaller receiver, but he can run. Ran a 4.34, something like that. Really good hands. As quick as as he's just as quick as he is fast. I think he's gonna be really good for the San Francisco. Like this, you could argue that with the additions of Jacob Cowing, Ricky Pearsall, still having Brandon Ayuk and having Debo, this is the deepest wide receiver group that Kyle Shanahan has ever had in his life. Now, we'll see what happens with Brandon Ayuk and if they're able to get something done there. I think by doubling down at receiver in this draft, there's no way in hell you're bringing back Brandon Ayuk on a massive deal. We've heard the kind of money that he's after, I don't see how that happens, especially when you've already paid Deebo Samuel. But, we'll see what happens. But Cowing is the perfect receiver for what they want to do with this offense. So, again, guy that can get in his hands quickly and let him do some damage, but also can take the top off the defense if you're not careful. So, another really solid pick by the San Francisco 49ers. Again, this is a good draft. Like I said, I used the term loosely, worst draft in this division, because I thought this was one of the stronger draft divisions this year in the league. So this is a really solid draft. The last two picks, they don't really move me. Jarrett Kingston, guard out of USC. He's solid. I think he did some really good things. He fits, again, the type of player that they like. He can move. He's got, good, strong grip in terms of when he latches on to a player. I think he struggles in space one-on-one. So, there's some limitations to his game, but, another guy that they get in the late rounds that they'll try to develop and have him be ready in the case of an emergency 2-3 years down the road. Tatum Bethune, linebacker out of Florida State, a guy that finds the football, but nothing that he does stands out. He's not fast. He's not big. He's not super strong. He's not afraid of contact. He takes on blockers, but he doesn't, shed them and get to the ball carrier on a consistent basis. He's a bit undersized, but then, if you're going to be undersized, you better be fast and athletic. He's not that. So, again, if he gets to you, he'll get you on the ground. The problem is at this level, running a 4.75, being 225 pounds, are you consistently going to get to ball carriers? And the answer to that is probably no. Probably no. So, this draft for me is a rock. It's a rock solid B-. I thought that they did some good things. My least favorite pick is your second round pick, and that can't be my least favorite pick. I'm not gonna throw the 6th and the 7th rounder in your face that they're 6th and 7th round picks, right? The ones that matter, your first 4 rounds matter. And of those picks, I didn't love Renardo Green. You know, I don't love him as a player. I don't hate where you got him. Let me reiterate that. But when you got him, I thought there were better players who could have fit your scheme better, if that makes sense. So a lot of corners were still on the board at the time of this selection. And I didn't think he was better than a lot of those guys. So the San Francisco 49ers come in 4th in this division with a B-. So now we get to the 3rd team in this division, and it's the Seattle Seahawks. And they had a really good draft. I'm really intrigued by what they're going to look like with Mike McDonald and, no more Pete Carroll. So it's all going to look different. And for the first time, John Schneider is in full control in Seattle. He hasn't had that because Pete Carroll was such an impactful and influential head coach. He was really coach-centric out there. So really interested to see what this looks like. I was actually kind of shocked that they used their first round pick on Byron Murphy. I probably should not have been, because their head coach is a defensive-minded guy, and Byron Murphy, you could argue, was the best player on the board. Remember, no defensive players went in the draft until the pick before Seattle selected. So they had essentially the pick of the litter of any defensive player that they wanted, stands for Latu, who went the pick before to the Indianapolis Colts at 15, if I'm not mistaken. So either 14 or 15. So they really could have gone in any direction that they wanted to, but they took the most talented defensive tackle in this year's draft class. In a draft class with some really talented defensive tackles, they took the best one. And he's a day one impact type of guy. And you put him next to someone you traded away a second round pick for, in Leonard Williams, and you already had other guys on that defensive line. That's a deep group, and it's a talented group. Love the pick, love the player, love the impact that he could potentially have. And you just think about the kind of season that we just watched Justin Madubuike turn in. And Byron Murphy is way more talented than Justin Madubuike. No disrespect to Justin Madubuike, but if he's posting, 12 and a half, 13 sacks under Mike McDonald, I love to see what Byron Murphy II is going to be able to do with Mike McDonald as his head coach. So love that pick, and I think this guy's a day one impact type of player. 3rd round, obviously, I just told you don't have a second round pick. You traded that away to acquire Leonard Williams from the Giants. So here, Christian Haynes, the guard out of Connecticut. Speaking of day one plug and play offensive lineman, Christian Haynes, which you lost, if I'm not mistaken. Did you lose both of your guards in free agency? I know you lost one of them to the Carolina Panthers. He signed a massive deal. I mean, look, I would have let him walk away. 5 years, $100 million. I would have let him walk away too. He was good. He wasn't that good, right? Christian Haynes is going to play guard for you week 1. Big. He's so much more agile than people give him credit for. He can move for a big guy, man. He's so physical. Let's get physical. And I get it. He went to Connecticut, not a D1 school, but doesn't matter, man. This dude was dominating the competition, showcased his skills at the Senior Bowl, played really well when the competition stepped up. And I just think he has all the traits and the tools of a guy that is going to come in and play 10, 11, 12 years in the NFL and go to 3 or 4 Pro Bowls, might even sneak in as an All-Pro one of those years. He strikes me as a guy that can play really, really well for you. So I love this pick in the 3rd round, personally. You get to Tyrese Knight, the linebacker out of UTEP. And I was scouting him heavy because the Commanders were interested in Tyrese Knight. And this dude's a tackling machine. You know, started out at a JUCO, played there for 2 years, transferred to UTEP. And a lot of people asked him, well, why didn't you transfer? You could have gone to a bigger school where you could have got more notoriety. And he was like, bro, I wanted to ride it out. Like, I wanted to finish what I started here. And so I think a lot of people appreciated that. So he didn't get the kind of attention that he would have gotten had he went to Oklahoma or Texas, right? But what he did do was he just posted numbers. Big, big, big time tackle numbers. Over and over and over again. He finds the football. You can drop this guy in the coverage. He's a good athlete. Sometimes he can find himself getting a bit sticky on blocks, but this is a dude that just reads and reacts, fires downhill, makes plays on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, finds the football consistently, and gets guys on the ground. And he's a good football player, a really good football player. And he's going to come in at a position all of a sudden of need for the Seattle Seahawks. And I think he's going to play well. So, like that pick in the 4th round. I think it was a little bit earlier than I thought he would come off the board. Thought he would be there in the 5th. But I don't have a problem with you taking him in the 4th. A.J. Barner, tight end out of Michigan. Physical, big physical, inline blocking tight end that can catch the football. Kind of fits the profile of a Seattle Seahawks tight end. You had a tight end last year who left in free agency. As a matter of fact, I think he went to the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken, in free agency. So he was your, big physical blocking, can still catch the football type of tight end. So that guy's missing, and A.J. Barner is the replacement, really good replacement, right? And doesn't hurt that he went to Michigan. I'm pretty sure Mike McDonald knows him. Those two obviously had their paths cross and intersect at Michigan. And so I think he's probably very, very familiar with A.J. Barner's game. And I think he's going to fit in. Again, I thought he was more of like a 5th round tight end. I thought there were other tight ends that were available at this time of the draft that were still on the board that were better value, but the kind of tight end that you were looking for, because again, you already have guys that you think are athletes that can catch the football. You weren't necessarily looking for that. You were looking for a specialty tight end. And that's what you drafted in A.J. Barner. And he can catch too. Don't sleep on him. You leave this guy open, he can make some plays. Solid pick for the Seattle Seahawks. These next 3 picks are why they went ahead of the 49ers. So Nehemiah Pritchett, the corner out of Auburn, is a guy that makes plays on the football, a corner that sees it well. I don't love him in man-to-man coverage necessarily, but the Seahawks aren't going to play a bunch of man-to-man coverage because the Ravens didn't play a bunch of man-to-man coverage. So I expect them to switch up their looks, but they're going to play cover 3. They're going to keep everything in front of them. And Nehemiah Pritchett is a guy that can do that. And if you make a mistake around him, he's going to make you pay for that mistake. And so I just think he's a guy that brings a lot to the table. I actually think this is pretty good value. I thought he would go in the 4th round. And, what's crazy is DJ James, who they got in the 6th round, who's his teammate, I thought was better than Nehemiah Pritchard. And I didn't even think it was close. I thought DJ James would go in the second round. I thought he would be a third round corner, but I wouldn't have been shocked if somebody took him back into the second round. And to get him, something has to be wrong there. Because I just didn't understand why in a draft where the nickel corner was in vogue and teams were picking those guys off left and right starting in the second round, I just don't understand why DJ James is sitting there. Like, that's an A++++ pick in the sixth round. But we're not talking about DJ James right now. We're talking about Nehemiah Pritchard. And Pritchard is a really good corner too in his own right. So he went where I thought he'd go. I thought fourth roundish, no worse than fifth, goes in the fifth. Makes sense to me. Sayatoa Luamia is offensive lineman out of Utah that I like a lot. And the thing about him is, it's funny because Washington drafted a Utah offensive lineman named Braden Daniels last year, and their games are very similar. Obviously, they went to the same program, but I like Luamia better, way better. I think they've got a guy that can play tackle in a pinch, but he's really a guard. He's athletic. He's strong. He's physical, can get to the second level, can cut guys off, plays with a nasty, temperament. I think he's got a chance to not only make their team, but eventually play meaningful snaps for them. So I thought that was a really good pick in the sixth round. And then I just talked about DJ James in the sixth round. Something had to go wrong. Like, there had to be a medical issue. He had to be a really bad interviewer. Teams had to have gotten a bad vibe, or something happened. I can't make sense of why he was available at this. Like, 31 teams passed on him multiple times, including the Seahawks passing on him in favor of his teammate. And then saying, I don't know why he's still here, but I'm going to take him. Or maybe they knew why he was still there, and then they decided to take him anyway. Whatever the case may be, this is an absolute steal. I love DJ James. And I think he can play ball. So we'll see what ultimately comes of DJ James. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, of the two Auburn corners that were selected, he's going to be the better of the two as a sixth round pick. But again, I don't know if there was a medical issue or if there was some off the field stuff that we weren't privy to. Just like we had no idea why the NC State linebacker Wilson was falling down draft boards and why he wasn't selected. And then we found out, he doesn't have an ACL. Oh, okay. All right. That'll do it. Maybe something was wrong with DJ James and we just didn't know. But whatever the case, that's the Seahawks gain if he is the player that I saw on tape at Auburn. And then Michael Jarrell out of Findlay, that's a guy you take late in the draft, developmental prospect, draft and stash him and see if he can turn out to be something for you down the road. So when it's all said and done, that DJ James pick to me was a steal. This is a third round pick you get in the sixth round. I'm at a loss as to why he was even available at that point. And so you couple that with the Byron Murphy and the Christian Haynes pick, you slide in DJ James in that mix, and then you throw in the Tyrese Knight pick. And I just think that was a really good draft, and that was tremendous value. I mean, even Sayatoa Luamia is a really good pick from Utah. I just think the Seahawks did a really good job of getting players that I think are ultimately going to fit what Mike McDonald wants to do. And I'm interested to see. You lost some players in free agency, and I felt like you went out and got some guys that can come in and maybe even help right away. in the place of some of those absent players. So you lose Bobby Wagner, who I think led the NFL in tackles last year. You replace him with the guy that was one of the most prolific tacklers in college football the last 3 years, in Tyrese Knight. You lose one of your guards in free agency to the Carolina Panthers on a $100 million contract. You draft Christian Haynes, who's a plug and play day one starting guard, right? So it all makes sense. It all makes sense. So this is a B draft. This is a B draft by the Seattle Seahawks. We go on to the team that comes in second, in this year's draft in the NFC West, and it's the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams, I don't think, get enough credit for what they do in the draft. I think we chastise them and we talk about what they don't have because of their disrespect and utter disregard for early round draft picks, trading away first and second and sometimes even third round selections, but definitely first and second rounders. And remember, this was the first time the Rams selected in the first round since drafting Jared Goff all the way back in 2016. They had not had a first round pick since the 2016 NFL draft. Let that sink in. This was the 2024 NFL draft. This is their first time selecting in the first round since 2016. That just goes to show you how disrespectful they've been with their draft selections early on. And yet they've continuously found quality football players in the third, in the fourth, in the fifth, in the sixth, in the seventh, and even scouring the undrafted market after the draft has met its conclusion. They've found football players who have become household names, at least for them, and played really well. And they've done a lot of this without the aid of a first or second round pick a lot of years. So you have to give their scouting department a lot of credit. You've got to give their GM, Les Snead, a ton of credit. And then you got to give, Sean McVay and some of the other guys who were a part of that brain trust for finding guys that fit what they do. A great example was last year, them drafting Puka Nacua. Like, they knew exactly what he was, what he would provide for them. They took him in the 5th round. He was arguably the best receiver in football last year. And I don't say that loosely, and I'm not being a prisoner of the moment. Go look at his numbers. There weren't many guys in the league that were better than Puka Nacua last season. So they knew what they were doing, right? And that's been who they've been, right? Finding those types of players in the 3rd, in the 4th, in the 5th, in the 6th, and in the 7th round. And it's put them in a position where they made the playoffs last year. They easily could have won that game at Detroit, and who knows what would have happened had they won that game, right? So you lose Aaron Donald. I just assumed that they'd spend their first round pick on a defensive tackle. And I believe if Byron Murphy were there, they would have done that. He was gone. Obviously, Seattle had taken him already. We just talked about that. They need edge rusher help. They take Jared Verse. And I had him as my number 1 rated edge rusher. Now, I don't think he's better than Latu, but I do think his combination of speed and power gives him a higher floor than that of Latu, right? You don't see that kind of raw physicality at the edge rushing position very often. I don't know if I've seen a guy that physical with his hands since Khalil Mack came out. So, and that was back in 14? So this guy possesses a lot of things that you can't teach. Now, still think he's a bit raw, still think there's some things he has to, continue to develop, but when you can win with power, it opens up a lot of things for you. So I think he's going to be able to come in and do the type of things that they need him to do for them defensively to have them be successful. It's a good pick. It's a really good pick in the first round. So is Braden Fisk in the second round, defensive tackle out of Florida State. He's one of my favorite players at the defensive tackle position. I love Braden Fisk. I love, the big knock on him is he's got short arms. But when you talk about playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage, you talk about quickness, you talk about impacting the game. Braden Fisk is right up there with Johnny Newton and, Byron Murphy the second in this year's draft. They were the big three to me. After those three guys at defensive tackle, I thought there was a significant drop-off. Still a lot of talented guys, don't get me wrong. But I thought those were the three guys that stood out. And Fisk going at 39 overall makes a ton of sense. And he is going to be the Aaron Donald replacement. They had tremendous production from the rookie that they took last year. I can't remember his name, but he played his ass off this past year, and they're so excited about him. And now you add Braden Fisk next to him. Kobe Turner was outstanding for the Rams this year, and now you add Braden Fisk next to him. That's a hell of a duo. And then you throw Jarrett Verse next to them. They're trying to do some things over there on the defensive side of the football for the Los Angeles Rams. Blake Corum in the third round out of Michigan. This one felt like overkill, right? This felt like a duplicate, but it makes sense when you think about it. So here's the thing. The Rams already have a back named Blake Corum, or a back. Yeah, his name's Blake Corum. They already have a back that looks like Blake Corum, plays like Blake Corum, runs like Blake Corum, does everything like Blake Corum, except his name isn't Blake Corum, right? I can't remember his name though. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, but he went to Notre Dame. And when he plays, the Rams are exceptional. I gotta figure what his name is, because I'm gonna kill myself trying to think of his name. Rams, Notre Dame running back. Kyren Williams. So Kyren Williams is a beast in Sean McVay's offense. And when he plays, the Rams offense is spectacular. The problem is, when he gets hurt, their offense isn't the same. So what did they do? They went out and they got Kyren Williams insurance, and his name is Blake Corum. And so those two in this offense, now they don't have to worry about if somebody gets hurt. We just put in the next guy, because they're duplicates and clones of one another. I think Corum is probably a better pass catcher of the two, but they're both, 4.5 40 guys. Oh, shit. Kyren Williams might have been a 4.6 dude when it's all said and done. Doesn't matter. They both have tremendous vision, good footwork, explosive through the hole, don't have that long distance speed, but it doesn't matter. They can make things happen. And so it's a great pick in the third round. When you look at it and you look at what Corum has been and what he can provide them, it's a no-brainer, right? You go to Cameron Kitchens in the third round, and depending on who you talk to, some people thought he was one of the better safeties in this year's draft class. The biggest knock on him was he didn't run well. He ran like a 4.65, and 7 years ago, that would have been plenty fast. But in today's NFL, that's considered slow at the safety position. So, but when you talk about this dude and ball production, this is where I think people misconstrue speed at the safety position. If you have the ability to read what's happening and get a beat on it and take off before it happens, your 4.65 looks like 4.52, because your ability to break on the football is greater than that of, and your anticipation is greater than that of the quarterback and his anticipation. If you're all over it, you can see it and read it and break. You could throw that 4.65 out the window. He's not afraid to come up and hit. He'll fill the alleys. He will come up and as a blitzer and hit you. Man had 11 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. 11. So if the ball's anywhere in his general vicinity and he has a chance to go get it, he's going and he's getting it. So they already signed Cameron Curl, who doesn't take the ball away, but is a really good player. And now they're signing Cameron Kinchins, who is a playmaker and takes the ball away. And so they might have a hell of a Cameron safety tandem in LA with the Rams. Another really solid pick there by the Los Angeles Rams. In the 5th round, the Rams selected Brennan Jackson, and he might be like my 3rd favorite edge rusher in this year's draft class. So much fun to watch him on tape. I would have been willing to spend a 4th round pick on Brennan Jackson, to be honest with you. I talked about Brennan Jackson throughout this process. I talked about how much I liked his motor. He's long, he's athletic, pause. He is a guy that I see getting better and better. And I think, with more NFL experience, we're just gaining that experience, learning from some veterans, I think he's only going to get better. He's slippery. He's got the size. This guy's 6'4" and some change, 270 pounds or so. But he reminds me a lot of Max Crosby in terms of the energy level and his size, and he's not as long, pause, as Max Crosby, but there are a lot of similarities there. My goodness. He's so much fun to watch. And I'm shocked somebody else didn't look at his profile, didn't look at the way he plays the game, see some of the traits that he has, because he stood up a lot too in a 2-point stance when you watch him on tape. I'm surprised somebody didn't just see him and say, you know what? Let's just take this guy. Well, he is the quintessential Los Angeles Ram, because he's a guy that kind of flew under the radar. Nobody was paying attention. The Rams get him, and we'll look up, and in his rookie season, he had 8.5 sacks for the Rams. And the Rams are ecstatic. We got this guy. They think they got themselves a stud, right? Of the 2 guys, him and Jared Verse, I wouldn't be shocked if Brennan Jackson ends up having more sacks this year than Jared Verse. I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if you told me that at year's end. Love that pick in the 5th round, if you can't tell. Love it, love it, love it. Tyler Davis, this is a draft class that's, to me, full of energy guys with relentless motors who just play from whistle to whistle. You get that from Braden Fisk. You get that from Cameron Kinchins. You get that from Brennan Jackson. You get that from Tyler Davis here. This was a former 5-star, high school defensive lineman who played 6 years at Clemson. And when you watch him, there's an energy, there's a stick-to-itiveness that comes with this game. You see that too. There was another guy that the Alabama Crimson Tide put into the draft at defensive tackle. Those two kind of remind me of each other. Similar games. I don't expect Tyler Davis to really impact the game from a pass rushing standpoint, but he's a guy in the middle of the defense that's going to be, stout at the point of attack. He'll get into that backfield from time to time, make some plays. I just think he's a guy that has a ton of ability. Matter of fact, he wasn't the 5-star. I got my guys mixed up from Clemson. It's the defensive end that we'll talk about, the edge rusher from the Cardinals. He's another high motor guy too. Same with Tyler Davis here. I like this pick in the 6th round. Defensive tackles with some size, with motors. Those guys can play 8, 9 years in the league just off of having high motor, continuing to fight, try to get to the football, be a good dude with, package with that, and you can stick around in this league for a very long time. Took a kicker in the 6th round, Joshua Carty, out of Stanford. I don't really have much to say. Took a kicker. You didn't take him before the 5th round. Got no issues with that. You followed all the rules. Good luck to you. Jordan Whittington, wide receiver out of Texas. I just remember watching him in the Alabama game and him making a bunch of plays, him having a catch where he broke a tackle, cut across the field, and he just seemed to be, he played really big. I thought when I watched him, I'm like, oh yeah, this dude's like 6'3". And then to find out he was like a shade over 6 feet, I was like, really? Because he played like he was 6'2", 6'3", and they used him like he was 6'2", 6'3". And instead, he's a 6-foot receiver that just plays big and physical. After watching what they were able to do with Puka Nacua, this guy's very similar to Puka Nacua. And so I could see Jordan Whittington having not a Puka Nacua type of impact in his rookie season. I don't see that. But what I can see is a guy that not only makes this Rams football team, but I could see a guy that ultimately has some success and becomes a integral part of their offense, 2-3 years down the road. Another solid pick because they know what they're looking for. It's like Sean McVay knows what he's looking for at receiver. Bo Lemer, center out of Arkansas. There are people that liked him better than Ricky Stromberg, who got drafted, in the 3rd round last year by the Commanders. Bo is interesting. He is a little bit more upright. He's a really good athlete. Like, he tested really well at the combine. And you know it, you see it on the field. I didn't see what he ultimately did at the combine. I didn't see that coming. But I wasn't shocked that he tested well because you could see some of the athleticism, and you always get, big brownie points for playing in the SEC against those big physical behemoths inside, having to block the likes of guys from Auburn and Bama and LSU and, depending on how far you get, Georgia and things that registers. Playing against the best of the best, the Texas A&M. These are guys that are going to get drafted on at some point. And to hold up in the SEC means something. Fits the athletic profile of what Sean McVay likes in his offensive linemen. And again, another one of these guys, similar to KT Leviston that they got in the 7th round, who's not as good of an athlete, but he is big and strong and physical. You throw these guys in the mix, see if they, are able to provide you anything. Worst case scenario, you continue to develop them. And this is what the Rams have done better than most teams in the league, is get these 6th and these 7th round guys, develop them. And these are the guys that end up helping them. These are the guys that end up being starters for them, not just special teams contributors or guys on the back end of the roster in a reserve backup capacity. No, these are guys who are logging real snaps that are impactful players for them. They've done a really good job. They've had to, out of necessity, develop those 5th and those 6th and those 7th round guys. And they've done a really good job of it to this point. And we'll see if that continues in this draft. All in all, this draft for me was a B+, because they know who they are and they knew what they were looking for. But they also know what kind of players fit what they want to do. A guy like Blake Corum, fits the running back position to a T because of what Kyron Williams has shown them, and knowing the impact of a guy like Kyron Williams and him being out. Now you have a Blake Corum. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Brennan Jackson is a high energy guy. Same with Cameron Kinchins, and same with Braden Fisk. And Fisk is a disruptor that can get in the backfield. And Jordan Whittington kind of fits that, Rams wide receiver DNA. Cooper Kupp, bigger guy, didn't, wow anybody with his measurables or his speed or this, that, and the third. Kills it in the NFL. Same could be said with Puka Nacua, and I see the same thing with Jordan Whittington. They're all kind of similar. He's not as big as Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but he plays big like those guys. So this is a B+ draft for me here with the Rams. It's a really good draft, top to bottom. It's good football players all over the place, and more importantly, guys that fit what the Rams want to do. And then finally, you get to the final team in this draft for this division, and the team that I thought had the best draft. You could argue they had one of the best drafts in the NFL. Like, if we're talking all 32 teams, they're probably in your top 3 of best draft classes this year. It's the Arizona Cardinals. So, they come in first in this division. They murdered the draft. Now we'll see what they can get out of these players. When you have 7 picks in the first 3 rounds, this is what you want it to look like. This is what you want to do. I don't agree with every one of these picks, but I agree with most of them. I don't really need to spend a lot of time on Marvin Harrison Jr. We know what he is. We know what he can be. We know the value in drafting him number 4 overall. They see him as the next Larry Fitzgerald in Arizona, and he's got the pedigree. He's got the size, speed, hands, etc., etc. He is exactly what the doctor ordered. He's the best receiver they've had in Arizona since DeAndre Hopkins, and he'll come in and give Kyler Murray a number 1 wide receiver for the first time since DeAndre Hopkins was dealt. Darius Robinson, or released. I think they just released. They flat out released him. So Harrison's going to come in and provide them with a number 1 wide receiver, which they desperately need. Darius Robinson was not, my favorite guy in this draft, but he fits what the Arizona Cardinals want to do. It's his versatility that ultimately makes him such an intriguing prospect. His first year playing defensive end, and he kind of blew up. And so he can kick inside, and a lot of the damage that he does is from the interior. But you can line him up outside as a base defensive end, whether you're playing a 4-3 or a 3-4, it doesn't matter. He's got the size to play as an edge rusher in either look. And then you can reduce him inside, and he can still rush against guards and use his quickness and his length to disrupt from that position. So that kind of versatility is invaluable in the NFL. And he brings it in spades. And so really good pick at the back end of the first round, which is where I thought his value was. Back end of the first round, early stages of the second. Max Melton in the second round. This dude was flying up draft boards. He probably started this process as early day 3, late day 2 guy. And, between the combine and the Senior Bowl and everything that he did, he was just one of those dudes that just every single postseason activity that he participated in, he just crushed it. Flew at the combine, jumped out of the gym. The tape, it's really good, right? I mean, He looks for the football. I don't know if there are many corners in this particular year's draft class in man-to-man coverage 30, 40 yards down the field that's looking for the ball like Max Melton. He finds the receiver and then finds the football. And that's a lost art in today's NFL, especially with these college kids coming out. You know, a lot of these dudes panic. They're taught, hey, if you're not in position, don't look back for the football. Play the receiver and play through him. You know, Max Melton always seems to find himself in the proper position, and then he looks back for the football. And he's a guy that you can blitz. You can play him inside. You can play him outside. There's a lot to like with Max Melton, man. And remember, Jonathan Gannon is at his core, he's a defensive backs coach. So he knows what he's looking for. And I think he feels like, man, I can do a lot of things with Max Melton. So I love that pick in the second round. Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State. A lot of people see him as a Breece Hall type. High, taller type of runner, tons of speed, can run. The production, was a little weird at Florida State because he didn't have a ton of big games, but you see the ability. And I think putting him in an offense with the Kyler Murray and the threat of Murray's legs and then giving it to Benson could be really, really dangerous. He's got the home run speed. He can make guys miss. He runs with power, good vision, good feet. There's a lot to like with Trey Benson. So I think he was the second running back taken in this draft class, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a tremendous pick. And I told anybody that would listen, the running back party does not start until the third round. Don't show up early, right? Just get there on time. They knew the assignment. They understood it. They waited. They didn't wait very long, but they said, hey, we got here at the third round, and now we're ready to select and get our guy. So I love it. Isaiah Adams was a guy that I did a little bit of extra homework on. He was a guy that Washington brought in for a visit out of Illinois at the guard position. So I was very familiar with his game. He's another one of these dudes that strikes me as a plug-and-play type of guard. You draft him, and I wouldn't be shocked to see him starting week 1 for the Arizona Cardinals. He may not start week 1. He'll be starting at some point in his rookie season. I think that highly of Isaiah Adams and what he brings to the table. He's big, he's physical, moves better than, some people give him credit for, but he gets the job done. And in this Cardinals offense where you're looking to create space, he's a guy that can do that. He is definitely a guy that can do that. Speaking of creating space, Tip Ryman, tight end out of Illinois. So they went back to the Illinois store. He does that at the tight end position. He's like having another tackle. This dude is 6'6", 270, 280. I mean, he's ridiculously big and a better athlete for his size. Like, I think he ran like a 4.54, something crazy at his size, which is just insane. Whatever it was, he didn't have a lot of production as a pass catcher, but he is a dominant blocker. And you can do so many things with him from a movement standpoint. Inline, flex him out, H-back, fullback. They already drafted a pass catching tight end last year that they liked from Colorado State. I think Tip Ryman is going to complement him now. I will say this. There were other tight ends on the board at the time of this selection that I went, whoa, you took Tip Ryman over that guy or that guy or that guy or that guy or that guy. But it's all in what you're looking for. Clearly, they were looking for a guy that could block. Clearly, that is what they were looking for. And you could argue they got the best blocking tight end in this year's draft class. So if you're going to do that, he better have an elite trait. Tip Ryman has that. Tip Ryman has that. Their fourth and final third round selection, their seventh in the first 2 days. So much like the Commanders, who had a bunch of picks. Nobody had more picks in the top 100 than the Arizona Cardinals. Commanders had 6 picks in the top 100. The Cardinals had 7. And I thought they made the most of it. And this was an excellent pick here in Elijah Jones, the cornerback out of Boston College. The guy that probably is going to make his home in the NFL as a nickel, but could play outside as well. Great ball skills, had 5 picks this year, I believe. Does a great job of mirroring receivers, stepping in front of the football, really good footwork. I think the biggest knock on him is going to be size. You can get bodied up a little bit, but I just like the tenacity. I like the way he plays. He's not always going to win the rep, but he's going to fight his ass off. And I just love corners that, look, you're going to be wrong as a corner. You're not always going to be right. Even the really good corners are going to get beat from time to time, or they're going to give something up. But when they make that mistake, that's the key, is when they make that mistake, are you capable of making them pay for that mistake? And the guys that don't look for the football, the guys that don't have that reactionary agility, the guys that don't have good hands, the guys that aren't playmakers, don't make the team or that quarterback pay for that mistake. And if you're not going to make me pay, I'm just going to keep coming over to your side. I'm going to keep trying you, because even if I don't get it right, there's no consequence. I get another shot. Not around Elijah Jones, you don't. He'll come up, he'll tackle. I honestly had him on Washington's radar right around this part of the draft, right here in the 3rd round. And the Cardinals, I thought they capped off a hell of a day 2 with this selection of Elijah Jones. Dadrian Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech. Ridiculous safety here from a height, weight, speed, standpoint. Now, not the tallest guy. I think he's 5'11-ish, but ran a 4.3 something, like 4.31. He's blazing fast. Got great ball skills. Had like 4 or 5 picks this year. A guy that you can play deep. A guy that you can drop over the slot, and he can play as a nickel. So there's versatility. He can come up and tackle. Again, the NFL is adjusting to offenses putting more athleticism on the field. And by virtue of that, you're seeing a lot more of these 3 safety looks. And they already got Thompson. They already got Budda Baker. Now they have Demerson to add to that safety room. And I think you're going to see all 3 of them on the field at the same time. And this guy offers you the ability to do that because he can come down and play over the slot. You can put him back deep. You can move him around and give you that kind of versatility. So that's where I thought he'd come off the board. That is excellent value. You could argue that he could have gone in front of some of these other safeties that came off the board. I think he's better than Cameron Kinchens. That's just me, though. But Kinchins is a damn good football player. Don't get it twisted. And if I'm not mistaken, Kinchins winning the third, I think, it might have been the fourth. Either way, I love this pick for Arizona. Love this pick for the Cardinals. Xavier Thomas is the 5-star recruit from Clemson that I was talking about. I confused him with the defensive tackle that the Rams took. This is the 5-star recruit, Xavier Thomas, who really didn't live up to expectations, obviously. Played 6 years at Clemson, is a extremely high motor guy, continues to play until the whistle. He actually has some, like, you see flashes of why he was a 5-star. Like, there are snaps where he comes off the ball like a raging bull and gets to the top of that rush and is able to turn the corner. He swipes those, gets that 2-hand swipe, knocks the hands down, is able to turn that corner, and then he's flat to the quarterback like that. And there are times where you go, oh shit. And then there's times where that shit just stalls out and there's no counter. He'll keep fighting, but there's no counter. So, and he's a little light guy that can get pushed around in the run game. So there's that. But I think they're intrigued by his ability to stand up in a 2-point stance and rush from that standpoint. And I think he can do a little bit of something. And I think they'll explore some of the athleticism that he has and see if they can't kind of tap into some of the things that made him one of the more highly sought after high school recruits when he came out some, 6.5 years ago. Christian Jones, offensive tackle out of Texas, is a guy that I think the Cardinals see as a developmental prospect. I don't think he starts right away, but I could see him starting in 2 years now. Here's the problem with Christian Jones. He doesn't offer a ton of versatility. A lot of these guys, he played left tackle, he played right tackle, he played left guard, he played right guard, yada, yada, yada. He's a right tackle. I don't know if you can even kick him inside the guard and get away with it. He can't play left tackle. He's not quick enough. He doesn't move well enough. And generally, I've said this, which is why I think he may ultimately get away with sticking at tackle. Strong hands, can latch on. And, Kyler Murray's the type of guy that he'll keep a play going. Remember the 2-point conversion play against the Raiders to send that game to overtime? He's a guy that'll keep a play a lot live for 8 to 10 seconds if you let him. So you like guys like Christian Jones who have those, G.I. Joe kung fu grip hands where you just latch onto a dude and just don't let him go. But he can get beat with speed, with elite speed. He will overset sometimes to try to compensate. And the lack of versatility is going to pigeonhole him, and he better end up being a damn good tackle. We'll see what happens. Tejan Palmer out of UAB, interesting guy. Similar to the receiver they drafted last year out of Stanford, who was a pleasant surprise for them. They got in the 3rd round, Michael Wilson. Tejan Palmer reminds me a lot of him. Kind of a bigger receiver, physical, can run a little bit, solid hands, just does everything well, nothing great, but does everything well enough to where there's a place for him. I don't think this is a throwaway 6th-round pick. I think this is a guy that they think can ultimately help them on offense. And even if it's not this year, next year. They're such a young team, though, and they're still turning that roster over that Wouldn't shock me in the least if he made the roster. Wouldn't shock me in the least. I like him for where they got him. Yeah, I like that pick a lot. And then Jaden Davis, defensive back out of Miami, developmental back, defensive back. Simple as that. You know, hopefully he makes your team on special teams. If not, you stash him away, you work with him, and you see if he can offer you something down the road. So a lot of picks here. How many guys did they take? This feels like a 13-player draft. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players taken by the Arizona Cardinals, and they did not disappoint. You know, there's not a ton of fluff here. You know, you go all the way down to their 6th round pick, the 11th player they selected, and you feel really good about just about everybody that they selected in this draft. This is an A draft for me. I mean, they crushed this. The Arizona Cardinals. When you're rebuilding and you're trying to figure it out, like their GM Ozenfort is, this is the kind of draft that I think you look back on and you say, this was a foundational draft. Last year kind of felt like they were setting themselves up for this year. They knew it was sort of a gap year with Kyler being out for the first half, having a new head coach. They had to straighten out a lot of things last year. They had to move on from some guys. They knew they were going to take their lumps last year. This year, I think they feel like they can compete. And this draft says, hey, we're not waiting around now. We want to start winning some football games. And this draft is reflective of that because there's a lot of guys that they drafted that they're going to be counting on day one to step in and play. And I think a lot of these guys are going to rise to the occasion and step up to the challenge. So Arizona Cardinals had the best 2024 draft in the NFC West division. So social media maneuvers, it's late, a lot later than I wanted it to be. So I got one super, I'm going to take that. And then, oh, Lord have mercy. Duncan Wright, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Duncan. Who writes, that huge logo behind you, where's the command? Yeah, okay. He's inebriated. He's had a couple of to drink tonight, which is fine. It's all good. This is a podcast episode. It's not a Commander's show, Duncan. So just hang in there, brother. Hang in there. So I'm going to just jump right into the final segment of the show in garbage time. And I wanted to talk about the 18 games schedule because we all know it feels imminent. 17 was just a precursor to 18. It's almost like 17 is just holding 18 warm, holding the spot warm for 18. It's a placeholder of sorts. And I don't know if you knew this or not. I didn't know this. I just found this out yesterday. So this was a bit of a shock to me. I was like, because as these league meetings take place and you keep hearing the 18 game thing kind of boundied about, you just expect it to happen in the next year or two. But according to the CBA, I just learned this. Now, unless some kind of alteration or adjustment is made, which they can't do without the NFLPA getting on board, which I don't see happening, they can't enact an 18-game schedule until 2031, which is the next time the CBA is up. This CBA only allows for 17 games. Just like this CBA only allows for up to 10 international games a year for the NFL. So they're currently up to 8. So they can continue to add more until they get all the way up to 10. And then that's the limit of international games they can have under this collective bargaining agreement. So during this period, during this CBA, they can only have 17 games. They can't add an 18th game until the new collective bargaining agreement, and that won't be reached until post 2031. Now, I didn't know that. So all of this talk about 18 game schedule, here I am thinking, man, in the next year or two, we might see an 18 game schedule because it felt imminent. But they can't do it for another 7 years. So you bet your ass, though, soon as that collective bargaining agreement is up in 2031, they're going to already have a plan in place to propose to the NFLPA to go to 18, and we'll see how that goes. They're going to have 18 games in the next CBA. Just know that. I'll bet any amount of money on that. But I was shocked to find out that the NFL can't go to 18 until the next CBA. Because the way they talked about it, the way they were meeting, talking about it, you would have assumed that this thing was in the works and that, it was only a matter of time here in the next year or two where they start playing around with the idea of taking away an additional preseason game, limiting the preseason to 2 games, starting the season around Labor Day weekend, right? Instead of the following, our first game is that Thursday after Labor Day, right? You could see them starting the season off that weekend prior to Labor Day. So that Labor Day weekend, and then, Labor Day is that Monday. That could be like this big, day where they have 3 or 4 games, sort of like Christmas or Thanksgiving, where they showcase, 3 or 4 games that day. But that last weekend in August, or depending on how Labor Day falls, it could be, the first weekend of September or the last weekend of August, because Labor Day is the first Monday of September, wherever it falls. So if it's September the 1st, then it's going to be the last weekend of August. If it's September the 6th, then it'll be the first weekend of September, whatever the case may be. I could see them turning that Labor Day weekend, that 3-day weekend, into a big opening kickoff weekend for the NFL. Because either you're going to put it on the front end or you're going to have to put it on the back end. And you're running out of space on the back end because if you come with an 18th game, the assumption is that you're also going to have to come with an additional bye week. I think the NFL Players Association is going to push for that. Like, if you're going to ask us to play an extra game, we're going to need an extra bye week somewhere in here. So now you're talking 20 weeks of football. And if you're going to do 20 weeks, you're probably going to have to start earlier, not later, because then you would be pushing back the NFL calendar further than it already is if you start later, or you finish later, rather. I think they're going to start earlier. But we got plenty of time to discuss, because they can't give us 18 games until 2031 when the CBA is up. Fascinating stuff. I might have just been late to the party. You might have already known that. I did not. You learn something new every day. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I look forward to joining you guys tomorrow, where we'll have a bonus podcast episode, and we'll be talking about X-Men 97. Let me reiterate this again. If you plan on watching and haven't watched, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the entire season. So if you haven't watched it and you want to watch it, don't show up tomorrow, because we're going to talk about it. If you're not a comic fan, if you didn't watch X-Men 97, you're not interested and you don't give a shit, probably not going to be the podcast episode for you. Probably don't want to show up for that one, right? That one is going to be pretty nerdy, and I'm not ashamed of it. So that one won't be for everyone, but if it is for you, I look forward to joining you tomorrow. That one should be lots and lots of fun. Anyway, I digress. You guys, get out of here. It's late, especially if you're on the East Coast. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys the next time. Until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. God bless and good night.